The Woman by the River Bend. The sun slipped low over the Montana horizon, brushing gold across the pine-crowned hills. Down by the river bend, a woman stood ankle-deep in sawdust, swinging an axe with slow, practiced rhythm. Each thud of steel against pine echoed across the valley, startling a few bluebirds from their nests. Her name was Clara Holt, 26, newly arrived, alone, and determined to raise a home with her own 2 hands. She'd come west after her father's death, carrying little more than a mule, a battered wagon, and a set of plans scribbled in his handwriting. The cabin she was building was more than shelter. It was her way of saying she could stand without leaning on anyone again. A half-mile away, from his porch overlooking the same valley, Eli Ward paused while mending a bridle strap. His gray-blue eyes followed the faint sound of chopping. He'd seen her a few times these past weeks, the woman in the calico shirt, sweat streaking her brow, hair tied with a rag. She worked from dawn until the sky went lavender. Eli told himself not to care. He'd buried his caring the day they'd lowered his wife, Mary, into the ground 3 winters ago. Since then, he'd learned to live in quiet. Cattle, chores, the soft breathing of his 7-year-old boy, Thomas, that was all he allowed himself. Love, laughter, and the warmth of a woman's presence had no place in his world anymore. But there she was again, setting logs into place one by one, too small a woman for such big work, too stubborn to stop. And every time he saw her raise that hammer, something restless stirred in his chest. Clara paused to catch her breath, brushing a curl from her forehead. Her arms trembled from fatigue, and blisters bloomed raw across her palms. Still, she smiled. The bottom logs were in. By week's end, she'd have the frame standing tall. She didn't notice the horse approaching until a shadow fell across the ground. "Evenin'," said a low voice. She turned fast, heart-jumping, and faced the rider. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dusted with trail dirt, the kind of man who carried the plains in his posture. His hat shadowed his face, but she caught the hint of a kind smile beneath his stubble. "Evenin'," Clara replied carefully. He dismounted with ease, tying his reins to a nearby stump. "Didn't mean to startle you. I'm Eli Ward. My land's over that ridge yonder. Been watchin' your build come along." Her brows lifted. "Been watchin', have you?" His smile deepened, shy but genuine. "Hard not to, ma'am. Don't see many folks tryin' to raise a cabin alone. Thought maybe you could use a spare pair of hands." "I'm doin' fine." She set her jaw, hefting the axe again, though her muscles begged for rest. "Appreciate the offer, but I manage." Eli nodded, not offended. "Reckon you do. But it don't hurt to let someone hold a beam while you swing a hammer. Makes the work go straighter." She hesitated. Pride was a heavy thing, and she'd carried it since the day her father's creditors took the family farm. But she looked at the next log waiting to be lifted, thicker than her own armspan, and sighed. "Fine," she said softly. "You can help. But just till I get this beam set." They worked side by side as the sun sank. He steadied the log while she hammered pegs through the joinery. Her focus impressed him. She was no helpless lady from back east. Every swing of her hammer carried grit and purpose. When the beam settled firm, she stepped back, brushing sawdust from her skirt. "There," she said, smiling for the first time. "That's half the wall done." Eli tipped his hat. "Looks sturdy. Like you knew what you were doin' all along." "My pa taught me," she said, her tone softening. "We built sheds and coops back home. He used to say, if you can stack it, you can live in it." He chuckled. "Sounds like a wise man." She nodded, eyes flickering to the river. He was. A long pause stretched between them, filled by the murmur of water and the cry of distant hawks. Eli wanted to ask what brought her this far, what she hoped to find in such lonely country, but he stopped himself. Questions had weight, and strangers didn't always owe answers. Instead, he said, "Got a boy back at the ranch. 7 years old. You'd like him, I reckon. Thinks the world's made o' mud and horses." Her smile grew faint. "You a widower?" His hand tightened on the hat brim. 3 years now. I'm sorry. He shrugged, eyes fixed on the river bend. Ain't your burden. Life don't promise nothin' forever. She studied him, the way his shoulders slumped under invisible weight, the grief in his voice that didn't need words. For a man like him to offer help to a stranger said plenty about the heart he tried to keep hidden. When he finally mounted his horse to leave, she called after him, "Thank you, Mr. Ward, for the help." He turned his head slightly, smiling. "You're welcome, Miss Holt. Holler if you need me again." She didn't plan to. But when the dusk deepened and the chill wind rolled down the ridge, Clara found herself glancing toward the hill where his ranch lights twinkled. That night, Eli sat on his porch, his son asleep inside. The stars were bright, crowding the sky with cold light. He sipped his coffee, letting his thoughts wander back to the river bend, to the sound of Clara's laughter when the beam finally settled, to the way she'd wiped sweat with the back of her wrist like she'd been born to labor. He hadn't thought of another woman's laugh in years. Didn't want to. But it came back to him now, uninvited, like a spring wind through old doors. Maybe tomorrow, he told himself, he'd ride by again, just to make sure the structure held through the night. Nothing more. But when dawn broke over the plains, he saddled his horse before the coffee had finished boiling. At the cabin site, Clara was already working, hammer swinging, hair loose from its tie, sleeves rolled up past her elbows. She looked up as he rode in, her expression half annoyed, half amused. "You again." He grinned. "Me again. Brought nails and a saw this time. Figured you'd run short." "I didn't ask you to." "No, ma'am. But I'm here anyhow." And for reasons she couldn't quite name, she didn't tell him to leave. All morning they worked. They barely talked, but they didn't need to. The silence between them was companionable, filled with the steady rhythm of hammers and the creak of timber. When a cloud of sawdust caught the sun, it looked like gold drifting between them. Around midday, he handed her a canteen. "You build like you mean to stay," he said quietly. "I do," she replied. "I've run far enough. Time to plant my feet somewhere they won't be swept away." He nodded, understanding more than she knew. When the roof frame finally rose against the afternoon sky, Eli felt something shift inside him, something he hadn't felt since Mary's hand had slipped from his. It was hope, fragile and unfamiliar. And as Clara thanked him once more, voice warm despite her exhaustion, he realized that maybe, just maybe, a widower's heart could still learn to build again, one log at a time. When the storm came down, the next few days rolled by under a sky bruised with clouds. The air hung heavy, promising rain. Clara worked faster than before, desperate to get the roof sealed before the weather broke. Every swing of the hammer felt like a race against time. Eli Ward showed up again, same as he had each morning since that first day. She stopped pretending to be surprised. He'd bring a few boards, a bucket of nails, sometimes a loaf of cornbread baked by his sister-in-law down in town. He never asked for anything in return. He just worked beside her in silence, the way two souls do when words would only get in the way. By the third day, the cabin had a shape, walls, a roof beam, and a door that actually hung on its hinges. Clara stood back and smiled for the first time in months. "You're near there," Eli said, resting a hand on the doorway. "By week's end you'll have yourself a home." She nodded. "Feels strange, doesn't it? Calling it that. Home." Eli studied her. "You been runnin' long?" Clara hesitated. The wind picked up, whipping her hair across her face. "Since spring. My pa passed in February. Men he owed came soon after. I sold what I could, hitched the mule, and headed west. Guess I figured if I could build something with my own hands, nobody could take it from me again." Eli looked down, jaw tightening. "World's cruel that way. Takes what you love, leaves you holdin' the pieces." Clara's voice softened. "Your wife." He nodded once. "Mary." Fever took her fast. Thomas was just 4. Never asked the Lord for much after that. Her heart ached for him, and for herself. Loss knew no boundary between men and women, only the quiet ache it left behind. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He shook his head. "Don't be. Talkin' about it don't hurt as much as pretendin' it never happened." Thunder rumbled across the distance, low and far. Clara looked toward the west, where the horizon had turned the color of gunmetal. "Storm's comin'," she said. "Big one," Eli agreed. "You got a place to hole up?" "I'll stay here," she said, glancing at her unfinished roof. "Cabin's near solid." He frowned. "Roof ain't sealed. Wind'll tear it clean off. I'll manage." "Clara," he said, voice firm now. "You don't argue with a storm. Pack your things. You and your mule are comin' to my ranch till it passes." Her pride rose again, but this time she saw something in his eyes, not pity, but genuine concern. The kind she hadn't known in a long while. She exhaled and nodded. "All right. Just till it's over." The rain began before they reached the ridge. It came in hard sheets, pelting against them with icy fingers. By the time Eli led her mule into the barn, both were soaked to the bone. He got a fire going inside the ranch house while Clara sat wrapped in one of his thick wool blankets, watching Thomas play quietly with a carved wooden horse near the hearth. The boy looked up shyly at her and smiled, the kind of smile that could melt even the coldest evening. "You build houses too, miss?" he asked. Clara chuckled softly. "Trying to. Though yours looks like a good bit sturdier than mine." Thomas grinned wide. "Pa says buildin' is about patience. You gotta fit things right or they fall apart." Eli, setting down a steaming mug of coffee for her, added, "He listens better than most grown men I know." The three of them laughed, gentle, easy laughter that filled the cabin like a forgotten song. As night deepened, the storm grew fierce. Rain lashed against the windows, thunder cracked so close it shook the timbers. Thomas had long since fallen asleep on a cot by the fire, clutching his toy horse. Clara and Eli sat across from each other, the firelight painting their faces in amber glow. She held her cup between both hands, watching the flames dance. "I'd forgotten what it feels like," she murmured. "What's that?" "To be safe. Warm. Not looking over my shoulder." Eli leaned forward slightly. "You can stay here till you're ready. Cabin work'll wait." She smiled faintly. "You're kind, Mr. Ward. Kinder than most." He looked down, voice low. "Ain't kindness, Clara. Just seems wrong lettin' someone fight the world alone when I know how that feels." Their eyes met, a moment of stillness amid the storm. It wasn't romance yet, not exactly. It was recognition. Two hearts that had both been broken, realizing they might not be the only ones left standing in the wreckage. Lightning flashed bright through the window, followed by another crash of thunder. Instinctively she flinched, and before she knew it, his hand was on hers, steady and warm. "You're all right," he said softly. "Just noise." She didn't pull away. The sound of the rain softened, or maybe it just seemed to. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The storm raged through the night, but by morning, it had quieted to a gentle drizzle. Clara rose early to help with breakfast, insisting on earning her keep. She fried bacon, scrambled eggs, even coaxed a smile from Eli when she teased him about burning the coffee. "You're not bad at this," he said, watching her move about the kitchen. "Building or cookin'?" "Both." She laughed lightly. "Guess I'm learnin' the way of the West, then." Thomas came running in, waving his toy. "Pa." "Miss Clara, the rain stopped." They all stepped outside. The world smelled of pine and earth, the air washed clean. The cabin down by the river bend had survived, though a few boards had loosened. Clara turned to him. "Guess I should get back to work." He nodded, though something in him tightened. He didn't want her to leave. "I'll help you fix what the storm took." "I can," she began, but then smiled, stopping herself. "All right. We'll fix it together." They rode down to her land later that morning. Mud sucked at their boots, and the ground gleamed wet. Her half-built cabin looked like a wounded thing, one wall tilted, a few logs displaced. "Could have been worse," Eli said. "We'll brace it up again." They worked all day, side by side, laughing through mishaps and teasing when Eli nearly dropped a hammer on his boot. Clara caught herself enjoying it, the company, the rhythm, the sense that she wasn't fighting alone anymore. When they stopped for water at midday, she noticed his hands, strong, scarred, but gentle when he passed her the canteen. "You miss her still, don't you?" she asked quietly. He looked out toward the hills. "Every day. But sometimes I think maybe the good Lord don't mean for us to stop missin'. Just to learn how to keep livin' while we do." Clara nodded slowly. "That's a comfort, somehow." Eli smiled faintly. "You talk like a preacher." "Hardly," she said with a laugh. "Just a woman trying to make peace with what she can't change." By the time the sun dipped low, The cabin stood straighter than before, patched, reinforced, almost whole. Clara leaned against the doorway, watching the evening light spill across the floorboards. "Would you look at that?" she whispered. "Didn't think I'd see it like this." Eli stepped beside her. "You built this with your own hands. Oughta be proud." She looked up at him, eyes soft. "Couldn't have done it without you." He hesitated, then said quietly, "Maybe not. But I think you would have tried till the end." They stood there in the quiet twilight, neither moving away. The wind hummed through the trees, gentle and sweet. For the first time in years, Eli felt peace settle over him, not the hollow silence of loss, but the tender stillness of something new beginning. As he prepared to leave, Clara called out softly, "Eli." He turned. "Thank you. For everything. For seeing me." He smiled, tipping his hat. "Reckon it's hard not to, Clara Holt." And as he rode off toward the ridge, she watched him go, heart steady, but warm in a way it hadn't been since before the world had taken everything from her. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, she hoped it might bring him back. A home for two hearts. Autumn came early that year. The air turned sharp, the leaves caught fire in red and gold, and the sound of elk carried through the valley at dusk. Down by the river bend, Clara's cabin stood finished at last, roof shingled, windows framed, smoke curling softly from a handmade stone chimney. It wasn't grand, but it was hers. Every board, every nail, every scar on her hands told the story of how she'd built her new life from the ground up. And yet, some evenings, when the wind sighed through the pines, she found herself glancing toward the ridge, where Eli Ward's lantern light glowed faint in the distance. He still came by often. Sometimes with supplies, sometimes with his boy, Thomas, who'd taken a liking to Clara's company. They'd skip stones by the river or help her gather kindling while Eli repaired fences or carried lumber. But today was different. Today marked 6 months since Clara had driven the last peg into her cabin's walls. 6 months since the storm, since that first night she'd sat by Eli's fire. And though she hadn't said it aloud, her heart knew something had changed, quiet, steady, and real. Eli arrived near noon, leading his horse with a sack slung over his shoulder. "Afternoon, Miss Holt," he called. "Hope I'm not interruptin' your work." "You never interrupt," she said, smiling. "Though if you brought that hammer again, I won't complain." He chuckled. "No hammer today. Just something I figured you might like." From the sack, he pulled a small wooden sign. Hand-carved letters spelled, "Riverbend Cabin, C. Holt." Clara's eyes softened. She traced the grooves of her name with trembling fingers. "You carved this." "Thomas helped sand it," Eli said, clearing his throat. "Figured every home deserves a name on its door." "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you." He smiled faintly, but his gaze lingered on her, the way the sunlight caught her hair, the easy way she stood among the wildflowers she'd planted out front. He'd thought himself long past wanting, long past dreaming of warmth beside another soul. But standing there, with her smile soft and grateful, he knew his heart had been building too, just slower, quieter, log by log. They shared lunch by the riverbank. The sound of water filled the pauses between their words. "Thomas talks about you near every day," Eli said after a while. "Says your biscuits are better'n mine." Clara laughed, bright and light. "He's kind. I burned the last batch." "Kind or not, the boy's got good taste." Her smile faded to something gentler. "He's a sweet child. You've done well with him, Eli." He looked away, modest. "Don't always feel that way. Some days I think he's raisin' me." She tilted her head, studying him. "He's got your steadiness. Your quiet heart." Eli chuckled low. "Quiet heart, huh? Never heard it put that way." "It's a good thing," she said softly. "The world could use more of that." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, that same pull that had lingered since the first time he'd steadied a log for her. As afternoon melted into evening, clouds began to gather again, though this time gently. No storm, just a soft promise of rain. Clara stood in her doorway, admiring the view. Eli came up beside her, hat in hand. "You done real fine here," he said. "It's a good place to call home." She looked up at him. "Home used to mean people to me, not walls or a roof. I thought I'd never have that again." He hesitated. Maybe you still could." She turned to face him fully, heart thudding. "What are you saying, Eli?" He took a slow breath. "Been a long time since I let anyone close. Thought my heart was buried with Mary. But these months with you, Clara, they've shown me something. That maybe buildin' don't stop just 'cause life breaks a few pieces. You start again. You keep hammering. One log at a time." Her eyes shimmered. "Eli." He stepped closer, voice low and certain. "You built this cabin with your hands. I've watched you shape your whole world outta dust and courage. And somewhere in all that, I reckon you built a place in me too." The silence that followed was warm, full of river wind and the beating of two hearts learning the same rhythm. Clara reached out, fingers brushing his rough hand. "Eli, I don't know if I can promise much. I've lost too much to make big promises." He smiled gently. "Don't need promises. Just maybe a seat by your fire now and then. A place to bring my boy when the world feels too heavy." Her voice trembled. "You mean, stay. Only if you want me to." For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she took his hand fully, pressing it to her chest. "I want you to." Eli exhaled, relief and tenderness flooding through him. "Then I'll fetch Thomas in the mornin'. He'll be mighty glad to hear it." That evening, they sat by her fire as the first drops of rain tapped gently against the roof. It wasn't the lonely sound it used to be. The flicker of flames painted warmth across the cabin walls, walls that had once echoed only with solitude. Eli leaned back, watching Clara hum softly as she mended a quilt. His heart felt steady, whole in a way he hadn't thought possible. "Funny thing," he said quietly. "Didn't realize how much I missed this, the sound of someone else movin' around, the smell of supper, the small talk. Feels like life again." She looked up, smiling softly. "You deserve that, Eli. You and Thomas both." He reached for her hand again, their fingers fitting easily this time. "Guess we both been buildin' somethin' we didn't plan on," he said. Clara squeezed his hand. "A home," she whispered. "That's what we've been buildin'." Outside, the rain thickened, not harsh, but steady, washing the world clean once more. A week later, a second sign hung beside the first. Riverbend Ranch, the Wards. Thomas had carved the last name himself, tongue poking from the corner of his mouth as he worked. When he finished, he ran to Clara, beaming. "Pa says we're all family now," he said proudly. Clara knelt, pulling him into her arms. "That's right, sweetheart. We are." Eli watched from the doorway, heart full, the late sunlight catching the golden strands in Clara's hair. For the first time since loss had hollowed him out, he felt whole, not because he'd replaced what was gone, but because he'd found something new to cherish. Love hadn't struck him like lightning this time. It had come like the steady building of a cabin, one nail, one board, one heartbeat at a time. And as the sun dipped below the ridge and the scent of supper filled the air, Eli Ward smiled to himself, knowing that some things, like family, like faith, like love, were worth rebuilding, no matter how many storms it took.